Alright, now we're going to start breaking up material and texture to be reusable. Okay, so before it was just mesh, and how do we break up a problem to solve it via mesh, and this will be our thing. We have these parts that can go together into many different configurations to formulate trim, and we can use that trim over and over again. So, and I also asked, why don't you develop a piece of your own? So here's the piece that I developed. What I did is I copied these faces right here on the top of this piece, and that way this can sit down in here. I can have it not sit down there. I can choose to put these pieces up here and tuck those underneath the shelf. And then I can make a whole bunch of those. I can add this piece down there to it, and it'll tuck quite nicely between the two. So that's the piece that I made because I thought it would be a really nice reusable piece later on down the road, even though it's very specific to this piece right here. Okay, then you're going to get into pseudo non-unique. Now, texture space. Well, texture space and material space. This right here, this one's going to say general store. So it's got to have its own UV set, and it's got to have a lot of resolution. There's no doubt about it. Because if you don't get those words spelled out right and that texture to look nice as far as readability, the resolution of the words themselves needs to be pretty high res. And here's that picture again that I'm just kind of looking at as far as a pseudo reference. And it's loading. So you can see here, general store, that has to be very high res. And you can see my method of operation for this stuff. You know, I'm just getting a general idea, not copying it perfectly, but what's a doable thing that allows me to make these reusable. Okay. So that high-res detail needs to be stated somewhere, and it needs to be stated in the UVs. So that part gets all its own UV set. It also has to be written on, which makes it a whole new problem. Because I have to worry about this piece right here being laid out flat enough to write on. Oops, it looks like some seams got in the mix there. Just start that over, it'd be easier. Let's start with the face that needs to be focused on the most. That face right there has to be laid out flat in order for me to get a really nice type on it in GIMP. Okay? So I make sure I do that in the UVs. It'll make it a little bit easier to texturize. I'll mark that as a seam. Okay, the back side isn't being shown at all, so I'm going to take advantage of that and put my majority of my seams back here. Oops, excuse my ability to navigate. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, so. Okay, let's mark that as a seam. And the rest of this is just getting kind of a spatial type texture. So I don't want to produce too many seams. So I'm seeing what can be included with this original part and still have it lay out flat. And I'm aiming for these very hard edges. Okay, so this little bevel thing's going to be tricky. How about I just do that and this one. Yep, mark seam. Alright, I'll split this area down the center here and add my UV image editor. Unwrap. So there's that piece laid out. And you can see that this piece right here is the part that I'm going to be typing on. Alright, is there anything stretched? And yes, there is. You can see these corner pieces right here. Actually, I'm going to get rid of that idea altogether. Go into sync mode and start marking seams over here that are on an angle. You can see in sync mode everything shows up. So it gets kind of confusing to what things are. Okay, take it out of sync mode. Those are the only ones. Now if this is going to be a separate piece altogether with separate UVs and everything else, we could take this out of the equation. That means mesh vertices separate by selection. Okay, so now I don't have to deal with any of the other parts, UVs showing up in sync mode. Okay, let me get rid of this. And this piece. Now I'll be able to hit A, U, unwrap. So over here, is that, yeah, okay, because that's on an angle anyway. That's what's going on. So clear that seam. That can be at an angle. Clear seam. And now I'll go in and just see if there's anything I can combine over here that would make more sense. Like this piece, for example. If this was marked and this was marked, and this was cleared, and this was cleared, that would be part of that now. I'll see if anything like that exists here. Okay, another obvious scenario. Okay, first off, I will mark that seam and mark this seam and clear this seam and clear this seam. Okay, that would fit quite nicely there. Now, the bad thing about this is I don't want to make this any longer than it needs to be because I need it to be as taking up as much UVs as possible, the UV space. So I'm not going to add these two little shells there because it would make it longer, and then I would have to reduce it down. And I'm not going to add anything there either. So I'm going to keep everything else the way it is because that way I can scale everything the way it is. I don't have to worry about that checkerboard pattern. But to make things a little bit easier for me, I'm going to rotate this part this way and put it here. Scale it down just a little bit, not much, just a tiny bit. Okay, and then I want this piece all by itself. So I'll go like that, hit A. There we go. I had to go in edit mode. I had to turn sync off. Because with the sync on, you can't hit L. I don't know why that exists like that, but we'll leave that up to the scribes, as they would say. Alright, so there we go. That's the UV layout I'm kind of looking for. Now I'll just have to know where my front piece is at mentally. And I guess I could turn sync back on just to find that. So if I highlight this edge, where is this edge over here? And that edge is up front, so this is my front piece. The rest of it gets a technical noise. And I like the color scheme of this turquoise type of deal with a darker blue on the top. That's really cool. I think I'm going to go for that type of color arrangement. And it goes nice against the brick. Alright. Now that we have laid out the UVs and I've talked to you through my method of madness, let's go in and think about adding some color and what order of things need to happen as far as what can we do 3D brush wise and what do we have to do in GIMP.